Quilters, we've got a wonderful tutorial for you today. It's a new follow-up, more information on the wonky log cabin. It is so fun, it is so free, and I'm super excited to share it with you. Are you ready? Let's get stitching. Well, welcome back everybody. My name is Rob Appell, quilt maker at Stitchin Heaven right here on YouTube, and having a blast making this super fun, super easy wonky log cabin. And yes, I have done these videos before, and if you've seen them before, please, I don't want to say disregard, but keep in mind, as I make a new quilt, like many of you, I'm always learning something with every new project I take on. And I feel like I've really learned some fun new steps, and I started teaching this project in public. And so I've come up with some step-by-step guidance I think that will help you construct your squares. And then what I also really want to do in today's video, because I have so many squares already built, in the past I've always done these videos with just a few squares, but I think it's important to teach you all that every block right now is squared, but they're rectangles and squares, and they're different sizes. What I have is some equal color parts, meaning that of the purple to green combo, I have 8 of those. Of the green to cream, I believe I have like 8 of those. I have some that are green and blue. I have some that are cream to blue. So there are different sets, and if you're working on building a quilt of grandeur, the best thing I can offer as the easy part of this is just build blocks and think in multiples of 4, really, because they often can come together in color squares. Now you can see we're using up all of our stash and all of our scraps as a scrap buster project. And the second key I'd like to offer before we start construction today is please notice how organized all of my piles are, and they're in color order from light to dark, and they're also kind of as the blocks move as I work through. So I'm going to be selectively choosing a piece as I go. Each one I make as I work through, I'm going to start with my red center. And for those of you who are brand new to quilting, red is a traditional center square for the log cabin, because the log cabin square represented the home, and the red was to represent the fireplace or the heart of the home and all of that love and beauty that surrounds that. So I am still honoring the tradition of a log cabin, but we're building intentional wonky blocks. So I want to walk you through how the blocks are going to be made. Let me pull one more off the wall, but I can only pull 2 because I don't want to get disorganized. I do need to point out within each color family that the color blocking or banking, the left-hand side and the bottom are going to go from blue to purple. The top and the right are going to go from the lime all the way to the forest greens. Okay, so that's one of the things that's really important, is that we do build in a systematic formula with our construction, even though we're going to be doing free piece construction as we go from here on out. Let me get these back on the wall correct, because now I'm nervous I didn't. And the last thing I will point out, but we're going to do all of this in the video, in the second half of the video, is how to build all of these ununiform sized blocks back into a real quilt top. So if you look closely, so I can just tell you a bit of the strategy as I'm thinking, I've started to already pre-audition in some greens between here. Yes, Marianne, you inspired me with your block. So anyways, I want to do lime green between my purples here. You can see there's a lot of space down here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start building this center square, and then from that point out, everything is going to really transition into groups of 4s, and I'm going to build by adding either strips of fabric around the outside pieces or the inside pieces, or both, to go ahead and build the smallest blocks up to meet the size of the biggest blocks. My guess is this quilt is really going to shift upward, so you can see up in the very top corner I've got a few inches of space. So as this quilt builds throughout today, and it will take me all day long to finish out the assembly of this, okay, because like I said, we're going to handle each piece individually as we go. Now, speaking of block building, iron's hot. The center of our squares is going to start with a red. In my blocks, I have 4 or 5 different red fabrics chosen. I like a little variety there. I've also found that this skinny little ruler, let's see, it's a 3 by 12. I really like, because I'm making skinnier strips with this. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take, and I'm going to whittle this down a little bit, and you can see that I'm intentionally making a non-rectangular or non-square to start with. Now for me, I always use the lightest of my blues to start the blocks, and I'm going to literally just fit as I go. I like to pre-cut a strip down roughly 1 inch in width, and now I'm just going to go ahead and sew these as if they were right sides together. They are right sides together. They're solids, which makes it really easy to have these right sides together. They won't always be solids, but they'll always be right sides together. Oh, let me point out too, I'm using a scant 1/4 inch. I'm not having my edge guide on because I might later on sew on wonky size pieces along a straight edge. So that might help by not having something right here in the way of the machine. And I'm doing a little narrower seam allowance because I can, because everything is being individually handled. There's no math involved in today's project. I'm going to always press from the center out on my blocks. Okay, and again, we're going to start the video with block construction and we're going to end with quilt top construction in case you haven't seen one of these videos before. Okay, I'm only going to address basically one cut at a time as I go, and for my units on the wall, they are blue on the top and blue on the right as I start, and that begins my clockwise rotation around as I add on strips. Okay, so I want to carry on the angle that I had set with my first cut. So I'm going to continue through the red into the blue, just as you see. Okay, now I'm going to come down here and I'm going to see, is that going to fit in there? No. So I would rotate it, cut a block here, and that's if I'm using the same fabrics on both sides. Within my blocks, I've used both features. So on the ones that feature the cream, because I was using less fabrics, I don't want them to be as noticeable, I've used the same fabric on both sides of the fireplace as I go around my home. Okay, put it right back where it goes. But as I showed earlier on the squares, on the blue to green squares, I used different fabrics in each location as I built around. So you can see that light blue there. And then the next one, I'm going to go back in and choose a new color from my stash as I build. Okay, so right now I have found that putting the strip right back where I found it is super important. And then over in my pile, I have some squares, some rectangles, and a little piece that looks like it's going to fit real nice there. So now again, I'm going to sew this on. Sometimes our angles, this is like foundation paper piecing, our angles aren't always working for us, right? So I'm going to leave a little extra on either side of the working piece as I go to my add-on piece so that I can cut those down the road. The other thing we're really doing, folks, is we're using up a majority of our scrap so we can really throw the little parts and pieces into the pillowcase for the dog beds. We don't need to save all of this fabric forever, okay? I'm going to press again away from center. And I'm going to come back in a clockwise formula, and I'm going to now tend to just this angle. I'm going to slice that off. I've also found that I have my little trash catcher right here super close so that I can just constantly move the little parts and pieces over. And now I'm going into my lightest green. So I grab a light green scrap. Nope, not going to fit there. So I'll just grab yet another piece, and it's a big long piece. Still not going to fit in that direction. So again, I come here, I notice that that's my points from my selvage. So I'm just going to cut myself off a chunk. Now, this is one of those steps that I find really works best if you follow this order of operations. So now that I've got this big chunk, we're not going to obviously use all of that, but I'm going to first sew it on, again, allowing that excess on both sides of the working piece we were already building. So first we stitch it on. Now we're going to press it over. So again, pressing away from center into the strip we've just added. Now, a lot of times you're going to have just one little sensitive piece that you love so much of your fabrics, right? Like I'm hoarding. I've got a teal over here that I'm just hoarding this one color of fabric. Oh, look at this one too. This is beautiful. I've been hoarding this all the way through the block, or the quilt, I should say. So in essence, you don't necessarily want to just start hacking this up because there's enough here for another piece. So what I've learned to do is I kind of start looking at my angle. See the red angle in there? And I don't want those lines to go perfectly straight. So I'm using my 1/2 inch mark on the ruler to kind of give myself a little bit of a wonky or less than rectangular or parallel lines. Now when I cut this piece here is completely usable. So it goes right back into my pile, and on the top, I'll grab that next to see if it fits. Now from here, I can rotate, and now I'm gonna trim using that original angle of the red, but now the blue's on here. So when I trim here, I'm accounting for all of this. Okay, as I sew through, and I've added on 2 blues, so I'm doing 2 greens as well. Let's use that piece we love so much. And the same thing. If this is kind of wonky, you might want to wait, we're trying to make it wonky. If it's unsightly, you might want to take a moment, press it down. And again, on something like this, and I should have got you footage while I was working on the quilt. I apologize, I did not. But I started getting up to 4 blocks at a time for chain piecing. So they look a little bit less random that way, but it did go a little bit quicker. So technically I can keep a strip like this and I can lay 4 units along here at the machine as I go. But if I'm not doing that, I'm just going to cut a little bit of a chunk of this one. This one I won't cut down again because it's already so skinny. And what is so skinny mathematically? I know you mathematicians out there are dying today because we haven't used any numbers. I really am not cutting anything much wider than 1.5 inches. And nothing much skinnier than about 3/4 of an inch, because I do want to be able to angle my cut a little bit, and we don't want anything less than 1/2 of an inch because we don't want the parts of the fabric to go missing. The skinnier the strips, the smaller your blocks. The bigger the strips, the bigger your blocks will end up, or obviously the more strips you use. Okay, now this is really cool, folks. This is the next step-by-step process along the way. I know we've been talking about a couple different things, both design and construction steps. But now that we're making our way all the way around the clock, we're right back to where we left off. And sometimes this is where us log cabiners get confused. Which board goes on next, right? Well, if you look closely as we've gone all the way around, here was our first piece, but it's now trapped between our last piece, right? So this is why I like to not trim both sides. I don't really know where I want to go right now, but I have enough that I can change the angle of my cut this way. I can change the angle of my cut this way. I can go straight, and I don't change every cut to an angled cut. I play with some parallel cuts and some angled cuts so that I don't have to work really hard at the end to make a really oddly shaped unit back into a square block, if that makes a little bit of sense. So for this one, let's just play a little bit. I'm just going to trim a little. But what's so cool here now is this is where we can kind of remember how to read the block. From here on out, your block or your unit will talk to you. So we know we need to add on because this is the trapped piece. We also know it's blue because we're always adding on to the same color family of which side we started with. Okay, so I'd already gone through my light blues. So now I'm going to come on over here and I'm going to get into a darker toned blue. This piece makes me really happy because it's about 3/4 to an inch wide. And it also has what I need to go ahead on a little bit of both sides and make sure that I have fabric after I stitch this on. So this process now continues until the entire block is constructed. And yes, you, like I said earlier, can chain piece these, but I find that a lot of the joy and the beauty comes from personally placing these pieces as you go. Look, over here in the true corner, although it's been a bit of a limiting factor in my design, I snuck my name from one of the selvages right into the quilt. But now this block must remain right side up in my design concept. So this one really is buried over in the bottom square, kind of as my signature block. You probably can't even see that, but I know it's there and I got to put it right back where we found it. Okay. Back to the rules of the block building or our cabin making. Once again, we've trapped a blue. We're going to add a blue. See those parallel lines of that edge right there? Well, let's change that a little bit. Now I'm going to make a little bit more aggressive angular cut. That looks terrific that way. And now I'm going to grab one of my next blues in the line. Like I said, they don't have to be perfect. And now maybe I do want to add in this wonderful teal color. And you'll notice I've got this odd shape. So now I'm going to kind of rough cut. I can probably get 1 or 2 slices out of this. Maybe we'll use this later on in a small placement. But again, I'm just going to lay that gently. So in the videos before, I was sewing at an angle and then trimming. So please note, the big change is now I am cutting the block unit down to a straight edge and I'm applying a straight edge piece. So we're really doing 1/4 inch sewing, and I believe this is helping the block units lay nice and flat, okay? Secondly, we've learned that we're pressing away from center before we trim down. We're trimming to manage the extra. We don't want to get rid of any fabric that could be important later. So this will go back in the pile. We're also keeping our fabrics organized so we're not hunting for fabrics as we go along. Once I rotate, I trim to prepare for the next piece, constantly in a clockwise motion. And I know that I'm adding a green because I have trapped a green between those 2 pieces. And away we go around the entire blocks until your blocks are made out and look just like you see here. Okay, different color combinations, again, using different pieces. And you can see here, I started to use the same and I remembered, whoops, we got to switch them around. So one of the fun things about this kind of work, there's so much going on in the quilt, there really are no actual rules. So have fun with your fabric placements. But as we talk about fabric placement, I do want to note some of my darker colors, some of these real rich purples and things like you see here, you're not seeing much on the wall. Let's bring these back into position. And as I started to point out earlier in the video, it's now time that we build our blocks into a quilt top. And yes, they are all different sizes. And the key is really going to be to find the one that is most significant. So me, it's going to be this kind of focal block. And like I said earlier, I want to add in, so I've been auditioning some lime green between these. But now let's break it down. I'm going to take off my audition fabrics. And I'm also leaving now some separation up on the wall, because what we're going to really try to do is make it as easy on ourselves as possible. We are going to build from our smallest block up to the size of the biggest block. And again, we're going to try to take 4 into consideration at a time. So I believe what I want to do, and you don't see me do it very often, but I'm just going to grab myself a straight pin here. And this straight pin is going to represent this upper corner because all of my design has already been laid out and all of the blocks fit together nice enough. And folks, it took me quite a while on the floor. It was easier to slide and manipulate to come up with a design that worked based on the colors I had created and the sizes of all of the blocks. So now we're going to move these to the design table so we can really focus on what we're doing here. And we're just bringing them right down in order. Okay, so technically, if I really wanted to build this into a square, it sure looks to me like I could put a strip along here, a strip along here, and a strip along here, and that would completely do it. So if I do add green here and here and here, that is going to put green in 3 spaces, but not here. So technically, I want to add my green here first. So a little bit of chess playing with our quilts, okay? I want to add my green here first. So just like with the other blocks before, but because I've been wadding this and moving it all around, I'm going to take a moment to press it. Sometimes when the strips are this long and this wide, because I have this little skinny ruler that I do like so much, I'll just fold the strip over. Should be roughly, probably a leftover binding strip. So now I'm going to cut down roughly a 1 1/4 inch strip or so, which should leave me another 1 1/4 inch for later. And now, like I said, double checking my work, I'm going to add this strip right in here to the smaller of these 2 blocks. Okay, so I'm going to take this. I see I have a selvage, cutting that off, laying it right here, a little bit long. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sew it in. Okay, and now I'm going to take off, leaving about a 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. Press away. Come back in and I can see now, lining up this outside edge, that that's going to do a pretty nice job for me. So technically, I can go ahead now and trim this side. Now, I want to choose a different color to keep it fun, organic, carefree. So this one that has just a little bit more yellow to it, we're going to add this one in. We're going to add it in right here. But I am truly, because of the way it needs to fit back in, I'm going to add it to this block here. So I'm not going to sew all 4 of them together until I think they're all going to fit. Hoping that makes a little bit more sense, okay? So now I'm going to add this color here. Easy, same thing. Let's pre-cut this down to roughly 1 inch. I know I don't want them any wider than that, so there's no reason to waste the fabric either as we go. And now I'm adding this to the small block, keeping in mind that the edges were trimmed down, so I don't need to trim again before I'm adding this on. We'll come over here, cut down so we can save our units. Okay, so now it looks like we are starting to get somewhere, folks. If I look at this bottom edge out here, I can still add 1 piece to this, and I can add 2 greens next to each other to make it really fun, or I can add another purple. So what I'm going to do to make life easy is I'm going to now rotate this block. Because I've added on a new piece, I need to square it back down, and this is where I can add a little bit of fun to my angle. I'm going to grab that scrap from the one we used on our first sew. I'm measuring to make sure it fits. Like before. So really now I'm using all the same methods I learned while making the squares to go ahead and make this, the fill-ins. So we'll call these the sashings, I guess, for lack of a better term. And I don't get concerned if it starts to look like it's getting out of square, because remember, we're going to trim it down to square with each time, okay? So I can come here knowing that bottom edge is supposed to be square, and I can start to re-square this. And I want to make sure I can leave a 1/2 of an inch up here so I have just that little teeny quarter showing later on. Those scraps can go into the scrap bin. Okay, as I work through, this piece now can also be re-squared and adjusted. And we are becoming closer and closer to being able to make this union here. Okay, I want to add on a darker purple to fill in this because I want the skinny green instead of adding in a different green here. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to see if this purple fits this direction. Oh, it's just a little teeny short, so I'm not going to cheat myself. I'm going to go ahead. Still wish somehow, does anyone at home, let me know in the comments below, do you wish you had more sewing space at home? Who doesn't, right? Anyways, I'm going to cut this down this way to make my life easier. Remember, it's all from the scrap bin. Then I'm going to make myself roughly a 1 inch cut here. That's going to go back on here first. Taking the time, still pressing away from center. Okay, so you can start to see that's making up for it, but I want to push this all the way out so it's here when we're done. So I really think I'm going to need to go again with this lighter green here on the outside. So I'm going to actually take these strips, I should have cut it just a little bit longer and put in there, or I can just find, which is even more, I think, fun and unique. Ooh, that's going to be perfect, a different strip. So now I'm going to grab this. I want to trim this one off before I get started. I don't know if a different angle is all that's important at this point. We're getting pretty minute. Uh-oh. Okay, that's going to add into that space next after we get this one on. So the edges that are clean and trimmed, I try to always sew together. I really feel like that's helped in this newer formula. And what I'm doing right now with these 4 blocks, I will, like I said, go ahead and do to build out other groupings. And then we do it one more time, almost like sashing in between the groupings. And as I work through the quilt for the rest of the day, I will make sure I capture video so that it looks like it all happened in just a few moments, right? When in essence, you can see that the joy in this is the joy in getting to work throughout your entire project, individually picking your fabrics and individually sizing your project as you go. Really fun and easy. Let me show you this last little trick because I think it will help. Noticing that this is already long, but this is the piece that's going to go in here. Okay, even though they're on the same side of the cabin, we're not going to get really busted at this point for overlapping because we have so many pieces coming together. So instead of taking all of that time to trim and iron, I'm just going to line this up now at the top, come into the sewing space, do that same 1/4 inch. And I'm putting a complete solid against the Shadow Blush from Benartex. It's a mottled looking fabric. So I do try to pay a little attention not to get too many prints against too many prints or too many solids against too many solids. I was trying to rotate them as I went through in the blocks a little bit with a solid and a print touching, or at least varieties of color. I think that does help create interest in these wonderful log cabin projects. So now that I have this green on here, I'm going to take a moment, slide that out of the way just so I can trim this piece comfortably. And now I want a pretty square cut. So I'm looking at that bottom strip I just put in. I'm going to make a square cut across here, scrap bin that. So in essence, we should be now just about perfect and square. Okay, so it looks like if anything, I might have a little trim down here or an add-on. But like I said, we're only addressing the center now. Later on, I will be adding strips around this to make up for the spaces that fit within here where I put this back. So right now, we're just tuning the center square for this center space. So we're not going to worry about the outside edges. We're only worrying about the inside edges as we build. So at this moment, I feel pretty confident that I can both join this seam here. Okay, see how it's coming? Let's take the time to press. And at this point, it's maybe you want to press to the dark side if you have that option. It's not going to matter much because everything's freestyle here at this point. Okay, I did want my greens to be a little skinnier. So I can take this. Maybe I want to grab a bigger ruler to protect my hands and my project and everything. So as I get ready to put this strip together, let's trim this down just a freckle. Remember, we're going to always add to the outside again. I'm going to come up and line up those bottom corners down there. That's going to be the most important for now because it's that center seam that's going to stitch together, right? And now, before I clutter up my workspace, I'm going to take down to about 1/2 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch, 5/8 of an inch or so, some of this green. I don't need to have so much showing, but that's the easiest way to do it now because again, I'm just reading it by my eyeball. We set that there. This belonged here like this. I'm lining up the outside corners. I'm not lining up this green tip. I'm lining up the purple and the edge of the patchwork as I come in here. And now as we take this to the ironing board, we should see that wonderful limey green surprise in the middle, showing just enough to be really interesting, but not overpowering, tying back in the theme of the blue and the green throughout the whole project. And then, before I get too carried away, just to make my life easier, I'm going to go back and I'm going to trim, maybe still using this longer ruler, these spots where everything on the outside edge lines up fairly square. Right? Just a teeny bit of trimming to do. So there's no reason that I need to leave any of that there now. But obviously making a point, as I come around to these sides here, I may have another block that needs to fill in. I may need to want to put on an extra little strip here. I could always undo a little bit of stitching right here to put in a new strip and then sew that back over. Same as right here. So all I'm going to do now, just because it's bothering my eye, is I'm going to trim the purple strip off. Okay, but I still know that I could add a piece in here and I could add a piece in here if necessary. I'm not too worried about it at the moment because we still have a lot of building to do. Okay, so here's my block though that I had pinned. So now I know I can bring it right back up in here, and I'm going to actually take that and I'm going to rotate it to hold it into the wall so nothing else moves. From this point on, I'm going to spend, like I said, the rest of the afternoon putting together the units so that I can show you how this quilt really finishes out. Systematically, I'm going to start moving through the quilt on the pieces that seem to be, I'm going to call them maybe a little more easy. This next grouping down here in the corner, it looks like I just have a few strips to add in. This grouping up in here, looks like I have a couple of strips to move in. Also, if you look at the whole project, I've got 5 blocks across by what are 6 down. So what will probably happen is I'll do 4 by 4 by 4, 4, this 4 that's already done, and this 4. And then this row I can add in, but remember, we've got a lot of space up here. So as I build these out, I don't want to have to chop any blocks. So I'll keep adding space between the individual squares now to build up for that extra space we're after as we go towards the top. So let me go ahead and get some music going in the studio, spend the rest of my afternoon building the key parts and pieces so that you can see how this wonky quilt top comes back together. It's going to seem like I'll be right back. Not quite a second, but not as long as I expected either. About roughly 2 hours of work plus a little snack in here. And I now have technically 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 big blocks with 4 units of the log cabins each. And then I also have 2 more groups of the 2 sets. I decided throughout the process not to do the row idea And if you're looking really carefully, I moved this group and this group based on the size once they came together, because they were more like the sizes around them as squares. And then I believe I moved this group and this group again, but because they had 2 blue sides and 2 green sides, I was able to switch these units. They're similar, and yeah, there's some interesting pieces and stuff. But now, yes, basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna now treat these blocks like I did earlier with the small units, intentionally leaving the space here, as I said before, where I'll start to go through and fill in. And let's talk about something like this right here, okay? Now, I'm not gonna just go ahead and piece one straight piece all the way through here. What I'm gonna do is I might do some splicing and some patching so you don't see it. And as I'm really looking to begin with, I think what I might do is build this as a row. So I might need just one piece of green across here to make this and this the same size, another piece of green across here to make this the same size. Down here, I can add some dark blue across the bottom and a little bit of green across here, and I think those will come together. And I may just trim off this bottom row, and that actually might make all of that fit. But I'm not sure width-wise, so I might need to build some more in between here. So now I am literally gonna just address these coming together closer and closer and utilizing the darker pieces. You can see I've already omitted all of my white scraps. So now we'll just be using my colored fabrics to pull together greens and blues and whatnot as I work through. So again, I will be back in just a second to show you the final product. Okay, folks, there it is, basically straight out of the sewing machine. Hopefully you can see all of it. I'm really excited. Didn't take nearly as long to assemble. Super fun and wonky. You can see I ended up with some wider strips out towards the outside, but that's okay because we still need to quilt it. And I might even put extra borders around this project. But you can see how easy it was to build those wonderful freestyle or wonky log cabins, and then building those log cabins back into squares, or taking the units 4x4, then building those back into groupings that actually fit into the quilt fairly easily. One of the things I didn't mention earlier, but I want to remind you, don't rush and put in huge wide strips. It's okay as you get towards the outside to use those wider strips like your normal borders, but on the inside when you're fussing those blocks together, don't let your strips get too wide or too big or too apparent that was your union or your patchwork or your link strip that put all of your blocks together. So I certainly hope you enjoyed today's video. I would love to know from you in the comments below. Have you tried a wonky log cabin? Would you like to try this method? And if you've tried a wonky log cabin in the past, what did you learn in today's video? Anyways, folks, thank you so much for being here with us today in the recorded tutorial. Check us out on a Friday live. You might also really enjoy our fun little random scrap block generator we're calling the Scrap Masters. We do that on the Friday live as well. So thanks again for being here. Until I see you again, please stay well. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. It really helps support our channel. If you haven't subscribed, do so now. Hit the little button to be notified every time we go live or do a new video for all of you. And here's one from the past I think you'll really enjoy.